When angry elves attack, cosmic portals malfunction, and Jane just wants a normal date with Thor, one podcast dares to ask, what if they just said sorry? This is Super Sorry.
Welcome to Super Sorry Takes on the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the podcast where we talk superheroes and super apologies.
We're Todd and Amber, creative co-conspirators who love to discuss movies, TV, and the wild storytelling choices that come with them.
What started as the two of us obsessing over the power of a good apology has turned into our favorite place to explore the stories we love through the messy, meaningful lens of who apologizes, who refuses to, and who really needs to.
We've kicked things off with the MCU because no one avoids emotional responsibility quite like a superhero. Their leaps of faith, their disasters, and their inability to just say sorry.
We're exploring how apologies shape a hero's journey, in this case, a superhero's journey, and how these stories hit us in real life.
Each episode, we break down one MCU movie to ask who messed up, who owned up, and who really should have just said, I'm sorry.
We're peeling back the emotional baggage under the armor and the capes. What informs their choices, what derails their courage, and how saying or refusing to say sorry reveals who they are beneath all the myth and thunder.
And since we leave no realm unexamined, consider this your official spoiler alert. If you haven't watched Thor: The Dark World, grab your hammer and catch up.
We're not experts, just fans with feelings. And if we miss something or get it wrong,
we are
super sorry.
All right, story time. Before we get into the chaos, the cosmic goo, and the questionable family loyalty, here's our whirlwind tour through Thor: The Dark World.
And you know the drill. Spoilers incoming like a Rainbow Bridge freight train. If you haven't watched the movie yet, hit pause and go stream it. If you have seen it but need a quick memory refresh, we've linked Marvel's official Thor: The Dark World page in the show notes.
Thor: The Dark World kicks off with ancient elves waking up from the world's grumpiest nap. Their leader, Malekith, wants to use a weapon called Aether to plunge everything into darkness.
Meanwhile, Thor is off stabilizing realms like it's his full-time job. Jane, still on Earth, accidentally falls through a glitchy portal and gets possessed by the Aether because, well, weekends are overrated.
Thor swoops in, very sorry I haven't called, and brings her to Asgard. But the second Jane shows up, so does every problem in existence, including the Dark Elves who attack Asgard in a spectacularly destructive fashion. In the fallout, Frigga, Thor's mother, is killed.
Thor realizes he needs his brother Loki's very specific brand of treachery to stop Malekith and the Dark Elves. But Loki is imprisoned and of no help, so Thor breaks Loki out, because bad ideas can still be necessary to the story.
The two team up, argue, pretend to cooperate, and eventually lure Malekith out. It goes sideways instantly. Loki eats a fake dusting like a 5-course meal. Malekith absorbs the Aether, and everything spirals.
Cue the convergence, that cosmic alignment where physics gives up, and suddenly Thor and Jane are fighting a dark elf army across multiple realms like they're trapped in a broken screensaver.
In the end, Malekith gets crushed by his own ship, the Aether is destroyed, big quotation marks, and Thor turns down Odin, who tries to hand over the throne to be a free-range hero on his own terms.
But then the real curveball hits. Odin isn't Odin. Loki is alive, disguised, and sitting on the throne like he owns the place. Because of course he is.
And with that roller coaster of portals, elves, and emotional damage covered, it's time for the apology audit.
It's time for the apology audit, where we each pick one fire apology that worked and one misfire, an apology that technically happened but didn't quite stick the landing.
After sorting through every sorry, sort of sorry, and almost sorry in the movie, we've ended up with the small but mighty list of 7 apologies in Thor: The Dark World.
I'll start this time with my fire pick, which is an apology from Loki to Thor. It is pretty obvious, where Loki says, I'm sorry, during what seems to be his apparent death after Loki dies in quotation marks, after helping Thor against Malekith. It definitely mattered in the moment.
Yeah.
And I think it matters to Thor. It shows some very rare vulnerability from Loki. It shows, I think, the grief and the guilt he has that's tied to his mother Frigga's death. And later on, it gives Thor essentially emotional permission for him to be able to reject the throne and and also that it softens this dynamic between him and Loki. He even gives Loki a compliment later on about how he understands how to rule. He says it to what he believes is his father, Odin. Of course, the only thing that I don't like about this apology, but I'm still going to make it my fire apology, is that Loki doesn't die. And he pretends to be his father, Odin, on the throne at the very end of the film. So even though I think that diminishes this apology a little bit, I'm still choosing it as my fire apology because I think it was still effective to Thor. It still showed some remorse and it fulfilled the opportunity for Loki to express some of his grief. So that's why I'm choosing this as my top apology, my fire apology for this movie.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of Loki, centric actions or reactions to his decisions that kind of set up this movie. He's locked away in the cell and certain things happening because of that. He's not there to help Frigga because he's not being a good son. He's locked away, kind of blames Thor. And like, you had me locked in there. Why were you in there? Your own fault, So he's kind of coming full circle at the end, kind of taking, acceptance of like his past actions and to kind of show remorse. But I guess for my fire apology, I'll kind of maybe piggyback on that a little bit with Loki. And this is more through his actions and kind of his speech of saying, I'm sorry. It kind of continues with that scene a little bit before with Jane. There's actually a part where he actually kind of sacrifices himself to save Jane. It looks like a little portal opens up and starts sucking the things around them into it. And he pushes Jane aside and ends up almost getting sucked in the portal himself. So he's kind of coming full circle of, being a little more protecting of people instead of doing things that are causing damage or whatnot. In the beginning, Jane's pretty upset with him because of New York and all that kind of stuff. So, maybe this is kind of an apology through actions of Loki showing some growth there.
I think he does show some growth, and then he doesn't.
Or does
what
he?
Can you do?
We'll have to keep watching the movies to find out. But yeah, there's definitely a little question mark on the ending. You're saying when he's sitting on the throne. So who knows where he's going with that? Maybe there's positive things.
That's true. It could all be positive. All right. So let's talk about our misfire apologies. My misfire apology is an apology from Eric Selvig to Thor. And the setup is that Thor shows up where Eric, Jane, Darcy, and Ian are working. And Eric Selvig asks him about Loki. Is Loki with you? And then Thor tells him, no, Loki is dead. And Eric Selvig says, oh, thank God. And then stumbles and says, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
He's just so relieved that he doesn't have to deal with Loki. He does realize this is not appropriate. This is a poor response. And he does instantly apologize. But then you see a little smile when he goes to hug Thor because, again, he's just so relieved and happy that Loki is not there and he doesn't have to deal with them. Obviously, this is all because of the Battle of New York and everything that happens in the Avengers movie, but I just thought that's not the greatest apology.
Yeah, so it's interesting you kind of bring up the Avengers, and in hindsight, watching this now, again, it's much more Loki-centric movie than I kind of remembered going into it. I would agree that this is definitely a misfired kind of being gleeful that their sibling is no longer alive is a little interesting reaction, but I guess after seeing the destruction of New York in the previous movie, I guess you can see why he would feel that way.
Yeah, and he's not of really right mind right now. I think he has no pants on during the scene. So, grain of salt.
And now for my misfire, this is probably an obvious one, kind of a low-hanging fruit. And it's Jane to Thor. Amber's shaking her head. She knows where this is going to go. And it's basically after slapping him, she says, sorry, I just need to make sure you are real. I don't know if that is a good enough apology after slapping someone across the face. I think just do it twice too. So it's having a physical interaction with him and then kind of just like, I'm sorry, just checking that, make sure you're around. I don't know if that's quite lives up to the apology level that we're kind of looking for here.
Yeah. And I get that she's upset. She hasn't seen Thor after several years, or at least a couple years. She feels very emotional about it all, but violence is never the answer. So
and I guess I'm just kind of confused too about, would he be some sort of image, like 3D hologram? Like how is he not real in front of her? What is she saw him she said something about seeing him on TV. Oh, I've seen you on TV. Now you're here. But like, why is he not real? I guess.
So I think maybe she's had hallucinations or dreams or something that like she thinks he's there. And so maybe this is alluding to, I mean, I'm just making this up now, but maybe she's had a dream before where he was there and she woke up and he wasn't there. And so this time she thought, I'm going to slap him and see if he's real. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
But that's my only thought of why she has that line.
I feel like so that's why it's probably a misfire misfire for me because it's missing that context of why he wasn't real, now he's real or something. Maybe that would help for me. But just like not really explain that also is kind of a misfire.
A misfire, problematic, all of the above.
Yeah.
Well, I think we have some good options this time around. Let's decide on what our number one top fire apology is. So as a recap, mine is Loki to Thor. When he has been battling against Malekith after helping Thor, he is dying and he apologizes to Thor saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
And mine's also Loki, but this time to Jane. And it's when he pushes her out of the way so she doesn't get sucked up by the portal and he almost get taken by the portal himself.
Okay, well, this one's tough because they're like essentially the same moment.
Well, they're both the same person, Loki to different people. The big difference, though, is mine has action into it and yours is just a verbal sorry. So I think
think that matters.
I think it matters because he's actually putting himself in harm's way. And who knows what happens if he actually goes into the portal, where other ones are just kind of some words. And I guess now, because I'm thinking through to the end of the movie, it kind of loses some of the juice there for me. I mean, even if we had the whole plan of taking over at the end, that was a calculated risk to almost get transported somewhere else. Like the other thing, maybe it was always part of his plan, kind of saying, oh, I'm sorry, and, passed away. But the other part, I don't know. It seemed like that was a more in the moment thing and not really well thought through.
You mean the moment where he helps Jane is more in the moment versus when he apologizes to Thor?
Yeah, because it's just more reactionary, more where his real mind is. The other thing maybe is premeditated. The other one I don't think could have been.
Yeah. So what I will say, I did not understand how Loki made it back to Asgard. So I looked this up. So according to the internet, he fakes his stab wound. So when he's laying there dying, he actually hasn't been stabbed. It's an illusion.
Yeah.
And then he gets into a Asgardian, I guess, guard's costume and goes back to Asgard. Not costume, outfit.
It's a little costume. It's a little costumey of a guard's uniform, so I'll give you that. Yeah.
So because of this faking the moment, essentially, with Thor, even though I do think it's a good apology, we're going to go with yours because I do agree. In the moment, I think he was truly trying to save Jane. Like you said, his actions showed something that maybe his words didn't. All right,
I win one. Yay!
And then we have our misfire apologies. So as a quick reminder, mine is Eric Selvig to Thor when he exclaims, "Oh, thank God," when he learns that Loki is dead, and then follows up with an apology.
Yeah. And mine is from Jane to Thor after slapping him after she sees him for the first time in a couple of years. Sorry, I just needed to make sure you are real.
These are both very valid misfire apologies.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I am going to say Jane Foster to Thor because she had physical violence against him.
That's my thought with that. Yeah.
If it weren't for this example, I probably would be fighting for Eric Selvig to Thor because it was pretty inappropriate.
Yeah.
He's saying, my brother is dead, and he's gleeful. That's the word you used. It's a really good word.
Yeah.
But you should never hit somebody, period. And then following it up with an apology, but then a justification is a problem. Well, there you have it. We'll post our top fire apology and our misfire apology online. As always, let us know what you think. And up next, apologies that could have been, or as we call it, the super sorry verse. This is where we imagine the apologies that never happened, but maybe should have. We've talked through the apologies that did make it into this inter-realm roller coaster. But what about the ones that got swallowed by cosmic goo, swept under the Bifrost, or politely ignored while everyone pretended their family wasn't one bad day away from a diplomatic incident?
Welcome to Apologies That Could Have Been, our little corner of the multiverse we lovingly call the Super Sorry Verse. Imagine an alternate timeline where Thor works on his communication skills, Loki admits even one of his 1,000 betrayals, and the Dark Elves explain their intentions using something more than the brooding stares and weaponized eyeliner.
Because let's be honest, these characters can juggle portals, planetary alignments, and the occasional collapsing realm, but a clean apology still sends them spiraling. Thor offers heartfelt moments, but dodges accountability like it's a flying hammer. Loki weaponizes vulnerability for sport. Malekith says nothing, which honestly might be its own red flag. bag. And Jane, she's out here getting possessed by reality warping matter while navigating her feelings for Thor.
This is where we spotlight the moments absolutely begging for an apology. The ones that could have softened the sibling rivalry, rebuilt trust across realms, or maybe even stopped the Aether from using Jane as its unwilling Airbnb.
We'll unpack what should have been said, why these unsaid sorries matter, and what these missing apologies show us about navigating conflict in our own non-Asgardian lives, assuming the convergence doesn't drop us into an alternate dimension first.
Now travel somewhere over the Bifrost and step into our first apology that absolutely should have happened. My first wish for apology is from Bor, who is Odin's father, Thor's grandfather, to basically everybody in the 9 realms. And that's, for not hiding the Aether well enough. He says, bury it deep where no one can find it. And obviously it gets found by Jane. But also it makes me think back to the time where Odin gives the Tesseract, another one of the Infinity Stones, to the people in Norway for them to hide, and also doesn't do a very good job of it. So the whole Asgardian royalty, not great at hiding things away. So it's definitely very problematic, I should say, for all outcomes of these stories and movies because of it. And come on, guys.
Extremely problematic. And I had this as one of my top 2. My notes I had, this is cosmic mismanagement. Asgard claims to be the wise protector of the 9 realms.
Correct.
But it hides 2 Infinity Stones so poorly that they each spark disasters across multiple films. Like, this is a major problem. Obviously, they have made some massive mistakes.
In this movie, end credit scenes with them giving the Aether now to the Collector to kind of hide it and keep it out of sight of the rest of the world. So we'll see how that turns out, but it seems a little foreboding, at least in the performance received the Collector of saying 5 more to go. So 3 strikes and you're out for me.
Agreed. Well, one of the apologies I would have liked to have seen is an apology from Loki to Asgard to his family, Odin and Thor. And this is for pointing Curse, that dark elf, directly towards the palace, enabling the attack that kills Frigga. He tells Curse, you might want to take the stairs to the left. And this allows him to bypass Asgard's defenses and move deeper into the palace directly to Frigga, where he then murders Frigga. So Loki, in being very manipulative and wanting to see how this would play out, essentially sends Curse to kill his mother. So I think he owes a big apology.
Yeah, I think it's kind of some unknowing results there. I don't think that's really his intention for his action. He's just frustrated and wants to cause some chaos. I don't think he wants anything to happen to his mother.
No, he doesn't want anything to happen to his mother, but his actions do enable it to happen. And that's why I think obviously you see such profound grief and rage over her loss. But he never acknowledges or apologizes for that moment where he enables this to maybe happen.
Yeah, good point. I guess I didn't really think through those, how the one action, kind of resulted to that inaction. So it's a good thing to bring up. One of my needs apologies, I guess there's kind of a little sequence here. And it's basically with Jane, Darcy, and the intern Ian, when they are at the kind of abandoned, warehouse kind of place with the kids. It always kind of rubs me the wrong way how they're just kind of doing all these really dangerous activities around these little kids. I mean, they're like little, 10, 12-year-old kids. They see them, the kids kind of show them what to do and flipping things around and all that kind of stuff. But they kind of just don't talk to these kids oh, maybe this is kind of dangerous. You shouldn't be here. They kind of continue on all these weird experiment stuff around these little kids. So I think that always jumps out at me.
Yeah. I mean, would they really apologize to the kids, or they're just go on your way, kids. You shouldn't be here.
Yeah, exactly. I need apologies, but the results of their actions kind of I'm thinking more like their parents and the society as a whole, they're kind of not really doing a great job of, stewardship of these kids.
Agreed. So to your point with these little kids, what about Jane pulling Darcy and Ian into life-threatening anomalies on a frequent basis?
Yeah, it's kind of the same kind of thought, I guess. Really kind of putting people in harm's way.
Yeah. And I suppose that Darcy at this point should know what's up, but Ian probably has no clue. Also, there's a line in there about how neither of them get paid, which I'm pretty sure is illegal these days. Maybe not when the movie came out. I know there was a reckoning through the entertainment industry where interns actually now must be paid. But not only are they being put in danger, but they're also not being paid. Problems here.
Yeah. Putting people in harm's way for your own kind of benefit is not the best.
Yeah, absolutely not.
Kind of continuing, I guess, that is Jane during the scene when she's with the kids and with Ian and Darcy doing their kind of experiments, throwing bottles and cans and keys into the portal. She kind of just wanders off by herself to kind of explore on her own. I don't know what that's about. It seems kind of a weird thing. And gets herself into trouble. So she needs to apologize mainly to Darcy, because Darcy's the one that's worried about her, 5 hours later, and calls the cops or whatever because she's wandered off and doesn't know what happened to her because she's kind of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen this before in the first Thor movie where Jane is pretty selfish.
Yeah, yeah, definitely about doing her experiments come first. Yeah,
she's very focused on the science and trying to figure it out, and everything else just goes out of her mind, it seems like. So
yeah, it's a good point. Yeah.
Well, I would have liked to have seen an apology from Thor, Odin, or Asgard, one of them, all of them, to the people of London. They know this convergence exists. They know that one of the portals that appears seems to be over Greenwich.
Yeah.
And they don't really do anything to prevent it or even warn people and get them out of there in time. And a lot of people are impacted. So I think there's just something to be said here. Like, not only the people of London, but Earth always seems to take Asgard's fallout. I know they're kind of give Thor a hard time for wanting to help the people of Earth, but I think his heart is in the right place in these moments, that he's actually trying to do something while the rest of Asgard seems to just not care.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely bring up a good point. They're kind of locked in their own experiments, their own little bubble, and they're not thinking of those around them. Maybe the people of London I'm thinking of the scene where the birds kind of fly into the portal and then out of the ground kind of portal. The weird things are happening around them, but they actually know the reason why, and they're not really sharing that with other people, which seems to be kind of problematic,
Yeah. And I know Thor is very focused on bringing peace to the 9 realms. And I guess is Earth part of the 9 realms?
Yes.
So he's focused on that. But it's a macro view instead of a micro view, right? They need to be thinking about the little people in moments like this, and they're not.
I guess continue on, some selfish activities is Eric when he goes to Stonehenge and kind of does his nude streaking around and acting crazy. There's probably tourists, some people, going to Stonehenge to check it out on their own. And all of a sudden this crazy guy's running around saying all this weird stuff and kind of ruins their day.
But he should definitely apologize to them or to somebody. He takes some sort of responsibility. I understand it's a mental break and everything, but he needs to acknowledge something happened. And so my last one is just something that I kept on kind of just chuckling about. And I just feel bad for Jane's date Richard at the beginning. Not only is Jane already not ready to date, she just talks about Thor. That's number 1. 2, Darcy runs in, interrupts their meal, and then distracts Jane even more.
Yeah.
And then she just totally kind of up and leaves. He comes back around later on when somehow his phone call gets through, which doesn't make any sense to me. But
she kind of just leads him on too.
Totally. Totally just leading him on. Yeah. So I think at some point, I hope she gives him some sort of apology and then just breaks it off because she should not be stringing him along.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. These unsaid apologies could have eased tension across realms, softened century-old grudges, or at the very least kept family tempers from detonating at the worst possible moment. Which raises the question, what actually makes an apology work?
A real apology takes honesty, humility, and the willingness to stop hiding behind your own myth. 3 things the characters in the Dark World keep tripping over. Thor means well, but he dodges being truly vulnerable. Loki uses charm and chaos as a shield. Even Odin avoids the conversations that might have brought his family back from the brink.
This movie reminds us that growth isn't always epic or throne-shaking. Sometimes it's just choosing truth over pride before the damage multiplies. Thor is still stubborn, Loki is still slippery, Odin is still rigid, but each of them brushes up against the possibility of accountability, even if they never say the words out loud.
But what do you think? Which almost apologies do you think could have shifted perspective? Which ones might have softened the fractures between Thor and Loki, or eased the fallout that rippled through Asgard and beyond?
Up next, Damage Diary, where we tally the wreckage and ask the real question. When realms start collapsing, how much of that is cosmic disaster and how much of it is just one Asgardian family refusing to go to therapy? Welcome to Damage Diary, the segment where we tally the wreckage, estimate the repair bills, and try to figure out how many realms would still be standing if everyone in this movie had just taken a deep breath and talked things out. Thor, the Dark World isn't just interdimensional chaos, it's a multi-realm insurance nightmare.
First stop, Asgard. When the Dark Elves attack the palace to retrieve the Aether, they carve through Asgardian defenses and leave the Golden Realm with heavy structural damage, including the death of Frigga Riga during the attack. And when your palace takes a blast from a reality warping infinity stone and your defenses get shredded by stealth ships, we're talking astronomical numbers. We've got explosions, breached defenses, and an infinity stone powered assault that will require major reconstruction. Asgard's repair bill easily shoots into the $1 to $3 billion range.
Then we hop over to London, specifically Greenwich, the epicenter of the convergence. The battle spans London, Jotunheim, Svartalfheim, and Vanaheim, all thanks to malfunctioning portals. Buildings get slammed by dark elf ships, gravity glitches send cars flying, and entire plazas get ripped apart as the fabric of reality goes ballistic. That's not just wear and tear, that's a local council meeting from hell. With the damage and likelihood of having to repair major streets, plazas, and building interiors, we're talking a cost of up to $600 million.
And of course, there's Svartalfheim, the Dark Elf's homeworld. It's already a wasteland, but Thor and Malekith managed to add a little more scenic devastation during their battles. Not that anyone's filing a claim, the whole place looks like the universe's least inviting national park. There is minimal infrastructure left, so it's mostly terrain damage and crash debris. The cost comes out far lower than Asgard or London, closer to $50 million plus.
Add it all up, and Thor the Dark World leaves behind a damaged tab somewhere between multi-realm disaster and please stop storing infinity stones in places mortals can accidentally fall into them. Altogether, Thor the Dark World leaves us staring at a damage total somewhere between roughly $1.1 and $3.8 billion.
But beyond the numbers, Damage Diary is about the everyday people caught in the crossfire. The Londoners who just wanted to ride the tube without a portal opening over their heads, the Asgardian civilians who did not ask for stealth ship invasions, and anyone who now has to replace their entire office because a frost beast wandered through it.
That's right, we're here to talk about the innocent bystanders, the regular people caught up in the cosmic chaos. Because for every heroic hammer throw, there's someone sweeping up interdimensional rubble muttering, "Great," and who exactly processes claims for convergence-related incidents.
Let's kick things off. My first bystander is the Asgardian guards who are protecting, doing their job basically when Sif and Volstagg and Fandral are knocking them out, fighting with them when they're trying to rescue Jane and break her out of her captivity. Like aren't they on the same team here? Like they're they're kind of going at it, fighting with that, whole group of guards and keeping them off. So Thor and Loki and Jane and everybody can kind of sneak out, wherever. It just seems like kind of poor sportsmanship there or whatever. It's just like, wow, that's not a good teammate.
Yeah, agreed. And leading up to this before, they're already probably very fatigued, tired. They've already been battling the Dark Elves and Malekith and his minions. So
yeah, they're already having a bad day or a bad few days. And it's like, this is added onto it. And it's got to be a better way than what they did there. I feel like.
Yeah, it was definitely aggressive and
very aggressive,
bold.
Yeah.
I mean, even bringing Heimdall into it, right? And asking him to commit treason and all that.
I forgot about that too. Yeah. It seems very questionable stuff there.
Definitely. So, of course, we have the Asgard military, but what about the Asgard people who are also all impacted by these battles?
Yeah.
Even if they're not part of the fighting forces, their whole land, so many buildings and things are impacted by the battles. And then, what about family members who are in the fight?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of locations, there's damage done to buildings, to statues, to the infrastructure. Again, while they're escaping Loki and Jane and Thor, trying to get off Asgard. There's just a lot of damage happening, and people obviously have to clean that up. People have to repair these things, and people, again, already had a bad day, a bad week, and there's adding on to it in kind of very destructive, aggressive form doesn't seem to be that great. Yeah,
it feels like Asgard has to deal with this.
There's a regular thing. Yeah, exactly.
Maybe they just roll with it, but it seems like a problem to me. And then, on Earth, we have all these civilians, we have students, tourists, locals in London and around Greenwich. I looked up the buildings where the big ship comes in and just rams straight through the middle of them. That's the old Royal Naval College. So obviously students, staff, people who are there for their day-to-day work and student life. So obviously that's an impactful thing to happen to all those people. And again, because they get no warning, there's no true evacuation or anything ahead of time, though it doesn't seem like there's many people around. I will say, when you see the wide shot, there's nothing.
So yeah, I had the same thought too. I'm like, there's really nobody nobody around. How is this? This doesn't seem right. So just like the dark elves and Malekith's ship kind of destroying historical buildings in London, obviously a lot of damage going on there. But also Thor's kind of, gets in on the action too a little bit and does some damage into buildings and cars and stuff during his fight with Malekith. So it's not just the bad guys, the dark elves damaging London and the stuff. Thor's definitely kind of being very aggressive, which, kind of needs to be to win the day, but also is doing a lot of damage himself, but maybe there's better ways than how he's, taking care of business.
Yeah. I mean, I do think those London Underground riders seem pretty startled when he gets on, but he's actually pretty calm when it comes to he just rides to the next stop or two stops, whatever it is. There's that too. I would be pretty shocked. But then again, I think about like in New York when I saw weird things on the subway, like you kind of just roll with it. So like if I saw Thor, like I'd be like, hey, Thor.
Too much of it. Yeah. He's definitely, and he's a big enough man to ask for a direction. So I think that's a good thing. Like, good for him.
Good point. Yeah. And then I have to mention, we've sort of talked about this already in other segments, but there's the Stonehenge visitors and the local police who have to deal with Selvig's breakdown, his naked, streaking and manic kind of behavior as he tries to do scientific work, but in the nude, and obviously a little disarming and alarming for the Stonehenge visitors. And then, of course, for the local police.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of damage happening in London and the outskirts with, Stonehenge and whatnot. Yeah.
Definitely a lot of folks impacted. I think for this one, I didn't have any like standout, like single bystanders that I was like really focused on. It was more like groups of people.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, it wasn't too many individuals, like you said, too. Some of these scenes, there's nobody around.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a good thing, I guess. But there's definitely a lot of people having to clean up the mess as always.
Yeah. So while I didn't really have any true individual bystanders, I do want to mention our Stanley sighting when he is revealed to be one of the listeners to Eric Selvig explaining how to protect Earth from the convergence at the mental health center. So he's using shoes and a blackboard and pencils to explain the science behind how you can deal with the convergence. And after all that's done, Stanley asks him if he can have his shoe back. And that's Damage Diary, proving that in the 9 realms, even a normal day can leave behind collapsed courtyards, portal potholes, and at least one confused Londoner Googling, what do I do if a spaceship lands on my property?
Up next, our biggest takeaway. Because beneath the explosions, the ether mess, and the collapsing realms, this story has a lot to say about responsibility, honesty, and the apologies no one quite manages to deliver.
Thor, The Dark World shows us a hero standing in the rubble of cycles he didn't create but keeps getting pulled into. Ancient grudges, old wounds, and a family that would rather bend the truth than face it. Thor starts this movie trying to restore order across the realms, but beneath all the battles is a quieter struggle. Learning that strength isn't just swinging a hammer, it's choosing honesty over tradition, clarity over denial, and connection over pride. Our biggest takeaway? You don't need a throne, a crown, or a prophecy to break a family pattern. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is step out of the role everyone else keeps trying to cast you in. Thor can't undo Asgard's secrets, or Frigga's death, or Loki's betrayals. But he can decide which parts of that legacy he carries forward, and which parts he refuses to repeat.
Because being a hero in the dark world isn't about defeating evil elves, it's about confronting the shadows in your own story. Odin clings to control, Loki hides behind illusions, and Asgard's past tries to swallow its future. But Thor chooses a different path. He tells the truth, he owns what he feels, and he steps away from power instead of taking it for the wrong reasons. This movie reminds us that breaking cycles in families, in relationships, in ourselves doesn't always look grand. Sometimes it looks like choosing integrity over expectation.
And that's it for Thor, The Dark World. The ether is contained, the realms are steady for now, and what's left is a Thor who's clearer about who he is and what he does and doesn't want to do next.
We explored the apologies he offered, the ones he dodged, and the ones he deserved to hear, all woven into a story about a god trying to grow beyond the history he inherited. Because even when the past tries to pull you back into the old battles, there is always room to choose a better version of yourself than the one the world expects. expects.
But what do you think? Who owed the biggest apology? Did we get it right?
Hit us up on social media and let us know. You'll find our channels in the show notes or head to supersorry.com and join the Super Sorry Club.
As always, thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share the show.
On the next episode of Super Sorry, we're taking on Captain America, the Winter Soldier, where trust collapses, Hydra pops out of hiding like bad wallpaper, and Steve Rogers discovers an old friend is now a brainwashed ninja with a metal arm.
Join us next time as we dive into the conspiracies, the chaos, and the apologies that might have saved a whole lot of collateral damage. Until then, I'm Amber.
I'm Todd.
And we are
Super Sorry.
Super Sorry is written and hosted by Amber and Todd. Produced by Super Sorry LLC. Music by Jam Studio. Special thanks to MCU Wiki, Spoilertown, Business Standard, and MCU Location Scout for serving as sources for Damage Diary. Your support helps us keep asking the hard questions and saying the hard apologies. Thanks for tuning in and sharing with friends. And if you're listening from London, Asgard, or the Convergence, we are super sorry.
One last thing. I think most people are kind of aware that the days of the week are named after Norse gods. I think the most easy, obvious example is Thursday is named after Thor, so we have Thor's Day. But Frigga, she's where the name Friday comes from. So the lasting legacy from Frigga to us all. Happy Friday, happy Frigga Day. TGIF. Thank God it's Frigga.
Super Sorry is not affiliated with Marvel Entertainment, Marvel Studios, the Walt Disney Company, or Disney+. As of this recording, all Marvel characters mentioned in this podcast are the property of the Walt Disney Company.